Did you know that beneath the glittering facade of Hollywood's golden age lurked secrets so explosive they threatened to destroy careers and shatter reputations forever? In the next few minutes, you'll hear tales of betrayal, cover-ups, and betrayals so shocking that even Tinseltown's brass couldn't keep them buried. Stay with us, because once you learn how deep the dark side ran in the 1950s, you'll never look at movie magic the same way again. It all started in the early 50s, just as America was settling into post-war prosperity. The studios were churning out Technicolor dreams, lavish musicals, romantic comedies, and hard-boiled noirs. But behind the scenes, a very different drama was unfolding, a world of whispered gossip in dimly lit dressing rooms and frantic phone calls to hush agents. At the center of it all was one of the decade's biggest box office draws, Robert Mitchum. In 1951, Mitchum was arrested on marijuana possession charges in California. Headlines screamed arrest of Hollywood heartthrob, and fans watched in horror as the studios scrambled. Universal Pictures paid his $5,000 bail, and Mitchum spent 43 days in jail. Yet when he emerged, instead of fading into oblivion, he returned to the screen more alluring than ever, his reputation paradoxically burnished by scandal. How did he defy the all-powerful Hayes office? Mitchum's case became a rallying cry. Secret influence and secret payoffs could triumph over moral crusaders. The message was chilling. If you had the money and the right connections, you could corrupt the system itself. Just a year later, a far more gruesome event rocked Hollywood. In 1952, Lana Turner's daughter Cheryl Crane stabbed her mother's boyfriend, notorious gangster Johnny Stompanato, to death during a violent altercation. The press dubbed it the Hollywood crime of the century. Turner, the reigning queen of the silver screen, was said to have been hopelessly entangled with Stompanato, whose reputation for cruelty was whispered about in every major studio office. Cheryl insisted she acted in self-defense to protect her mother. Still, the district attorney treaded carefully. He feared that prosecuting Turner or her daughter would send shockwaves through the industry. In a secret grand jury hearing, Cheryl was cleared, but the aftermath was pure chaos. Turner's glamorous image took a hit. Studios worried that her association with organized crime would taint every picture she made. Yet Turner refused to be sidelined. She moved to Europe, staged a comeback, and proved once again that in 1950s Hollywood, scandal could be a springboard if you knew how to play your cards. Meanwhile, Judy Garland's struggle with addiction and erratic behavior made tabloid fodder in 1954. Garland, still beloved for The Wizard of Oz, was trapped in a cycle of studio-imposed diets, prescription sedatives, and public meltdowns. She famously overdosed before a nationwide concert tour, forcing MGM to send a press release insisting she was merely suffering from exhaustion. But gossip columnists knew the truth. Garland was on the brink, and nobody dared question MGM's Golden Girl strategy. Behind closed doors, producers quietly paid off doctors to keep her alive long enough to finish her contract. Her harrowing story laid bare the studio's ruthless willingness to exploit talent, to starve actors, dole out pills, and manipulate public perception, all in the name of profit. By mid-decade, another scandal seized the spotlight, the blacklisting of alleged communists. The House Un-American Activities Committee, HUAC, launched a campaign that decimated careers overnight. Screenwriters, directors, and actors were summoned to testify about their political beliefs. Some, like the Hollywood 10, refused and were jailed for contempt. Others named names to save themselves, leaving colleagues to languish in obscurity. One tragic case involved screenwriter Dalton Trumbo, who won an Academy Award under a pseudonym while watching Friends with her. The betrayals ran deep. Employees spied on co-workers, studios compiled secret dossiers, and anyone even suspected of leftist sympathies was ruined. Hollywood's dream factory unveiled its darkest machinery. Fear as a creative tool, compliance as currency, and the ruthless elimination of dissent. But perhaps the most sensational scandal of the 1950s centered on Marilyn Monroe. In 1955, whispers began that she'd had affairs with powerful men, including President John F. Kennedy. Publicly, Monroe was marketed as the ultimate blonde bombshell. Privately, she was battling inner demons. Her third husband, playwright Arthur Miller, tried to shield her, but the press couldn't resist. Paparazzi followed her every move. Studios leaked doctored photos to frame her as a wayward seductress. Then came the infamous Happy Birthday, Mr. President performance in 1962, but the groundwork was laid in the 50s. Rumor had it Monroe had been given an envelope with a secret audio tape, evidence of affairs with JFK and his brother Bobby, to keep her silent. No official confirmation ever emerged, but the impact was seismic. Hollywood, Washington, and the mob were entangled in a web of sex, politics, and blackmail. Monroe's story blurred the lines between private vice and public persona, demonstrating that the price of fame could be fatal. As the decade drew to a close, one final shockwave rippled across Tinseltown. In 1959, Natalie Wood nearly drowned off Catalina Island during the filming of Some Like It Hot. The official story claimed Wood had been rescued by co-stars Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis. But decades later, new evidence suggested foul play. Wood's husband, Robert Wagner, was seen arguing with her on the night she disappeared. The studio's publicist orchestrated a cover-up. Documents vanished. Witnesses were intimidated. Wood's body was returned to the mainland under a tight security detail, and the press obediently reported a tragic accident. In reality, the truth was far more sinister, an industry willing to bury murder to protect its image. By 1960, Hollywood had survived moral panics, drug busts, gangland ties, political witch hunts, and even suspicious deaths. The scandals of the 1950s revealed the length studios would go to control narratives, crush reputations, and manipulate both stars and audiences. Yet they also gave rise to a new generation of investigative journalists and courageous insiders ready to expose the rot. The question is, if these dark moments shaped an era, what does that say about the legacy we inherit? And more importantly, are we any better at confronting our own scandals today? The fallout from Natalie Wood's suspicious death only intensified Hollywood's focus on image protection. By the early 1960s, the studio system was crumbling, but the tactics it honed in the 1950s, blacklists, cover-ups, character assassinations, endured in a new era of independent producers and television moguls. Whenever a star's private life threatened a production's bottom line, a discreet bribe, a planted story, or a carefully worded statement could still suppress inconvenient truths. Yet for every shadowy victory, a new kind of reckoning was emerging. Columnists like Hedda Hopper and Louella Parsons, once cheerleaders for the studios, began to lose their grip on public opinion. Young reporters armed with tape recorders and a willingness to challenge powerful publicists started to pick apart polished narratives. Investigative magazines, such as Life and Look, published exposés detailing MGM's medical coercion of Judy Garland and Fox's brutal contract terms for Olivia de Havilland. Audiences devoured stories about the HUAC trials, demanding transparency from the film industry they loved. Meanwhile, some survivors of the blacklist quietly resurfaced. Dalton Trumbo finally received on-screen credit for Spartacus, 1960, and Exodus, 1960, signaling a symbolic end to the witch hunt era. Actors like Zero Mostel and directors like Edward Dmytryk returned to work. Their triumphant comebacks demonstrated that Hollywood's most insidious weapon, fear, could be neutralized by persistence and public solidarity. By mid-decade, the old guard had a choice: adapt or perish. The Paramount Decree of 1948 had already dismantled studio monopolies, but the scandals of the 1950s sealed the deal by eroding audience trust in manufactured glamour. Studios that survived: Paramount, Universal, 20th Century Fox, Warner Bros., started allowing stars more creative control. Frank Sinatra formed his own production company. Marilyn Monroe delayed Something's Got to Give until she secured script approval. Though these deals sometimes backfired, Monroe's perfectionism prolonging production. The shift underscored a newfound respect for star autonomy born from decades of exploitation. Television also began cannibalizing Hollywood's monopoly on fame and its scandals. In 1957, when Daisy Arnaz and Lucille Ball's marriage imploded publicly, the couple chose to address it head-on in I Love Lucy episodes rather than hide in Hush Money shadows. Their candid approach revealed another lesson. Vulnerability could humanize stars instead of destroy them. Audiences, once complicit in the studio's deliberate amnesia, now craved authenticity. The lessons of the 1950s scandals reverberate through modern entertainment. Today's chattering class quickly mobilizes to unearth misconduct, from Me Too revelations to deep-dive podcasts about behind-the-scenes betrayals. Yet many of the old playbook tactics, non-disclosure agreements, friendly smear campaigns, strategic leaks, persist. It took public outrage to dismantle the blacklist. It took unified outcry to expose MGM's abusiveness. It took decades for Natalie Wood's case to resurface in true crime documentaries. And even now, questions linger. Perhaps the greatest tribute to the 1950s scandals is the way they forever altered the relationship between celebrity and society. No longer could studios expect fans to swallow only the polished veneer. Instead, audiences came to recognize that the same magic that created on-screen illusions could also obscure terrible realities. That awareness empowered viewers to demand better from the institutions, from the stars, and from the culture itself. As the credits roll on this chapter of Hollywood history, remember how each scandal shared here began as a secret, an inconvenient truth buried beneath layers of spin and desperation. Yet each secret eventually surfaced, propelled by courageous insiders, persistent reporters, and fans unwilling to ignore the cracks. Their efforts remind us, power can hide wrongdoing, but it cannot indefinitely silence the human drive for honesty. So next time you watch a Technicolor classic or tune into an awards show, keep in mind the invisible forces once at work behind the scenes. Moral crusaders and criminal syndicates, studio execs and oppressed talent, demagogues and dissidents. They all shaped modern Hollywood's DNA. And if you ever find yourself dazzled by the glam or scandalized by the rumors, ask, what other stories lie buried beneath the silver glow of the screen?